Good afternoon, my Legacy Cast listeners. This is James Snow, your host for Legacy Cast. And here today, we're going to be speaking to a good friend of mine, Derek Murrell, someone who a lot of you may or may not know about. And if you don't, somebody who you should certainly get to meet and pick his brain a little bit, because the guy's very wise and learned when it comes to making money in the real estate investing direction. So certainly something you want to be aware of, because if you're not making money, then somebody else is. Thanks for being on the show, Derek.
Man, James, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
And as the name of the show would indicate, we talk a bit about legacy, but that's not the only subject we talk about. But we'll start a little bit here and refer to some questions pertaining to that. So Derek, what does having a legacy mean to you?
Well, a legacy to me, and I've thought a lot about this, to me it's simply something that extends much longer than my lifetime into future generations. So on the kind of the micro level, I guess it would be something that extends past when I die onto my families, and ideally to my family's families, and onward down to my posterity, I guess it's a technical term I could use.
Yeah. And, a lot of people that know me, and I certainly don't beat around the bush about it. I'm a person of faith. And so when you're mentioning, to your children, your children's children, that's something that's at the very core of what I do with my business. And, I don't sugarcoat about it. I'm somebody that's very direct about that to people, that, it drives what I do. And that should probably, especially people that I'm talking to, should drive them on some level, that they want to create something, and even just their story. It's kind of our way of making ourselves immortal, if you will. That we're able to tell people many generations down the way who we were, what matters to us, and what we did to make a difference in the world. Because otherwise, we're just wasting air, as they say.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting too. And I don't know if you ever heard this phrase, I think, if I don't butcher it, but from shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. It's that old school wealth. It was a kind of a phrase, I guess 100 years ago, but the issue was you get someone, like immigrants, for instance, they came over and they didn't have any money. Then they made a ton of money. Then their kids benefited from that money, but they didn't work for the money. And then their kids spent all the money, and then they ended up where they started. And that's one of the scariest things of legacy for me, because I think part of legacy is not just, me make a bunch of money and just pass it on. It's almost like me make money and teach my kids and my family what that means, how to preserve it, what money is, the good, the bad, the ugly, and then give that environment, give that tradition onward to the legacy. So it's to me, the legacy, it's actually twofold. It gives them something, right? Hopefully. Sure. And then you got to teach them how to keep it, so then they can actually grow on it. I hope my kids do 1,000 times better than me. And I hope their kids, my grandkids, do 1,000 times better than them. That's the idea.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Derek, because it's not just, like you say, it's not just that gift that you give your children, but the bigger gift is the knowledge. It's the knowledge of how to do with it and what to do with it, the knowledge of how to grow it and add to it, because what you do should become bigger after your kids are through with it. And then what they've done is bigger after their children are through with it. And so each generation, it should be growing, not decreasing. So I'm totally on board with you on that one.
Yeah. 100% agree, man.
So obviously you feel like that's an important consideration for people, that they should spend time and energy really defining what a legacy is. Would you say that?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, so, it's very important to me to have goals and what I focus on and all that stuff. But part of that isn't, part of it's I'm not in this thing to just make money and, drive Lambos and be on Facebook videos and all that stuff. I mean, that doesn't mean anything to me. I mean, the true essence of why I became an entrepreneur, why I risked everything to do it, why, you have some great days and you have some miserable days. I mean, the whole point of it is for family. It's for growth. It's to It's to build that legacy. So absolutely should be an element for anybody. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm biased towards entrepreneurs, but I mean, obviously I wasn't an entrepreneur for 90% of my life. So, I mean, it's just anyone that's working, or just anybody, I mean, should think, hopefully, what's going to happen in 20 years or 50 years or 100 years? Like, where do I see my family? Like, how can I, if there's something missing from what I didn't have, or something I want to create, like, how can I leave that to them? It doesn't have to be money. It could just be wisdom. It could be something that, motivates them to go after something. And there's a lot of complexities, but absolutely 100% agree. Very, very important. People should really sit down. This isn't something you just chat about for 2 minutes. It's something you probably sit down and think about for months and months. And you might think about it for years and adjust it. And as you learn more about it, you start, oh, okay, I didn't think about that. Or you talk to other people and they share their legacy building. And you're like, whoa, I never even thought about that. So it's almost like you have to have a culture of learning. That's the idea. And I think that's very wise.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned, Derek, the culture part of it, because to me that, especially the people that I'm talking to and that I'm coaching and consulting, is I want them to look at this as more of a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle that you enter into, that, it's not just, like you say, a 5-minute conversation or even a 5-day conversation or whatever. This is something that it should be all encompassing, and something that consumes us from day in and day out, week by week, year to year, throughout our lives, that we're always mindful of this. And it should always be a driving force in what we do, and a center point in all of our decisions, because everything does affect everything. And so it should bleed over into every part of your life, just like the rock that you throw into a pond. It should create ripples that go in all directions, not just one direction.
Absolutely agree. And I would add too, one reason we should, and I say we, I mean, we're in the context of the United States and America, the Western world. One reason we should think about it is simply because we can. We have the ability. You don't have to. I mean, any single person in anywhere, especially in the context of America, let's just say, since we both live here,
right?
We can think about it. So why would we not think about it? It's absolutely mind blowing why someone wouldn't want to think about this stuff.
Yeah, and you'd be surprised how many people don't, unfortunately. But you're spot on. You're spot on. So since you mentioned you being an entrepreneur, and certainly a lot of us and a lot of my listeners are going to be entrepreneurs as well, how would you correlate your mindset of legacy in general into your business?
Well, when I wasn't an entrepreneur, which was, I've been an entrepreneur since, now when I say entrepreneur, I'm talking full-time, 100% dependent on my production in life. That happened in September of 2014. So I'm not even 4 years into that point, but I'm long enough where I got kicked around a little bit, beat up, kicked in the face, all that kind of stuff. When I jumped, part of the reason I jumped wasn't that I didn't have a job. I did have a job. I was, made, I worked for the government, 100-ish, 90, 100K. I mean, it was, I guess, middle-class, cushy job. And when I jumped to be an entrepreneur, I jumped for the freedoms. I jumped for taking life in my own hands, and that I could produce and I can do things I really want to do. And so when I had that mindset, just from an entrepreneurial standpoint, part of that thinking is it's generational thinking, because I'm looking at, okay, I'm going to jump now. And how, say I was 35 at the time, I'm 35, I jump now. How is that going to, where am I going to be when I'm 65? Just push it up 30 years, right? That's a very short-term thing, but we jump out to make a better future, knowing that you're going to go through some major pain. And I told my wife, and we talked about it when we jumped, and she's super supportive, 100%. But when I jumped, I mean, we had the discussion. We said, this is going to be a 5-year, who knows what's going to happen, but we need to give it five years, right? Because most businesses fail. It's not going to be easy. We knew that coming in. So we sacrificed so much for that pain of 5 years to open up the rest of our lives. That was the mindset. So when we do that, I think long term, and I think, what do I want to pass on to my kids? I think, what do I want my kids to, to become? And you have I have 3 kids. So when you have kids, you think from a parental standpoint, then I guess if you're single and didn't have kids,
sure,
but
sure.
From my perspective, all that stuff is tightly knit together with all those decisions coming from jumping into being an entrepreneur.
So if you're to kind of look at this from a CEO standpoint, being that you are an entrepreneur, and if you were to think about your business and its future, and also your family's future, what would you say the 3 things are, 2 or 3 things that would keep you up at night? What would you think those are?
Losing everything.
Mm-hmm.
Something happens and you just lose everything. Number 2 would be the analogy, what if I got hit by a truck tomorrow? Mm-hmm. Meaning you might not lose your life, but you could lose all of your hustle and all this stuff, where I see so many entrepreneurs are so dependent on their hustle. They are their business. It's their legs, it's their hands, it's their body. They got to work the long days. And if you were to get hit by a truck tomorrow, for a lot of people, everything stops. Everything stops.
Sure.
I would say a third thing is, what if you got hit by a truck and you died? Boom, you're dead. You have a family or wife and kids, and they were all supportive of you. They didn't really, kind of sort of knew what you did, but they didn't know how to take over the helm and mm-hmm. make income. So those are very catastrophic.
Sure.
God forbid, hopefully it never happen, but they are things that you have to think about. And that's, thinking about those things, because I have thought about those things, means as an entrepreneur, how do I hedge myself against those things? Simply is one way to put it.
Sure. And when you're mentioning, what if, you get hit by a truck and you do survive, but it basically takes away your hustle. When I'm speaking to people, I tell them it's kind of like a printing press in your garage. If you have a printing press in your garage that's printing money 24/7, that thing's just generating out income for you. How much is that machine going to be worth for you? Because if something happened to that machine, what would you do? What is that worth? Would you not want to have sort of a backup plan? And especially with being business owners, we also need to think about that, because we're not building a business just for a day. We're building that thing because we want that business to continue. Even after we take our hands off the wheel, we want it to be continuing. Whether it's our children taking over, whether it's a business partner taking over, all those things. We have to look at that from the 30,000 foot view, from the big picture of we're building this not for a short term, but we want it to last on, because there's going to be other people dependent on that. Especially if we have, for example, employees, they're dependent on, our business. It's not just us. It's the employees depend on us. Other vendors are going to depend on us. So it starts, again, kind of that snowball effect.
Yeah. Well, and there's, not to get too philosophical on you, but mm-hmm. I look at it this way. There's no more precious time than the moment, right? Because, we're living in the moment every second. We're able to live here and we're in the moment. Well, if there's no more precious time than the moment, that means had I have, and go with me here, if I would have 10 years ago started doing entrepreneurship, mm-hmm. then there's a really good argument that today, 10 years later, I'd be in a vastly different place. I'd be where I want to be 5 years from now, because I had a head start.
Sure.
So if our most precious time is the moment, eventually, maybe 5 years from now or 10 years from now, that will be an immediate moment that we're living. And if we don't take those steps now to put ourselves in a position in the future, we'll never have that most precious moment. We're always going to be chasing our own tail.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I certainly agree with you there 100% as well. So I'm assuming that you feel it's very important for people to create a strategy for themselves then, and also for their business.
Oh, yeah, 100%. You got to. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of a no-brainer. I would take it. So what do you think the moment